What up, space babies? Welcome to Marx On The Mic. This is a show where I'll be talking about hip-hop and socialism. My name is Space Baby, and I'm a Marxist writer and musician. Now when it comes to hip-hop and socialism, the two are often talked about, but never in the same breath. Well, hip-hop's all about a do-it-yourself attitude, so here it is, Marx On The Mic. Now we're gonna see how hip-hop culture both says fuck you to capitalism, as well as reinforcing its ideology. It's a push and pull type of thing. Now you should definitely subscribe to this channel because we'll be releasing a video every week on Thursday and you don't want to miss anything. So without further ado, here it is. Let's do this. God, I'm excited. What you get when hip-hop and communism collide? Marx on the mic. So hip-hop was born out of capitalism's contradictions. Holy shit. There's a lot to unpack here, but don't worry, by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly what I mean. Now, hip-hop's origin is usually told by using the great man theory. This means that some geniuses had the idea of doing some hip-hop shit and changed the world. These people were Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, and Afrika Bambaata, also known as the Holy Trinity. I have no idea how to do that. But for you to understand how a Marxist analysis of the origin of hip-hop differs from the regular one, I'll have to explain the classical narrative. Now in 1973, motherfuckers were listening to funk and disco and all that good stuff. But the records that were played always had a part that made everybody hyped as fuck, and these were called the breaks. Now DJ Kool Herc had the genius idea to take the break from one record and just play that break. Then he would buy the same record, and every time the break would end on one, he would just repeat it on the other. This way he could loop the breaks till eternity. And this was called the merry-go-round technique. Now after Kool Herc did that shit, everybody threw an adidas jumpsuit, wore gold chains, and hip-hop changed everybody's lives. Or something like that. Kool Herc also knew how to amplify speakers so he could throw a house party wherever the fuck he wanted. Obviously people started to copy that shit. Some motherfuckers would drop the needle all over the place, some would play the same breaks all night long. I mean, it was just some sloppy shit. But then Grandmaster Flash descended from the heavens and perfected DJ techniques. Using a mixer and a marker, he would drop the needle on the perfect spot for the break to begin. This way he could loop the two records seamlessly, and it truly seemed like they went on forever. He also perfected scratching as well as other innovations with DJing. And by doing this, he attracted a lot more crowds than other DJs did. And then there's Afrika Bambaata. Like Moses and his 10 commandments, Afrika Bambaata codified hip-hop into its 4 elements. Afrika Bambaata was special because New York at the time was split into different gang territories, but Bambaata could move through each territory without getting shot, which is a good thing if you want to spread around hip-hop culture. This way hip-hop got out of the Bronx and turned into a movement, and eventually a worldwide movement. Another thing he did is he played records nobody else would play and mixed them in with hip-hop or play them during the same nights, like funky, weird German electro records and shit like that. So he tied hip-hop culture to any musical style you can imagine. So the great man theory would say that without them, hip-hop would have never existed. As well as that there were ideas, whether they were musical or technological, that pushed musical history forward. As a Marxist, I say no to both. I say that hip-hop was born out of capitalism's contradictions. Now obviously Flash, Bambaata, and Herc are legends, and we as hip-hop lovers are incredibly indebted to them. But hip-hop's history did not start with them. My boy Marx wrote, "Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past." So when it comes to hip-hop, what were those circumstances? What were the conditions for something like hip-hop to arise? Now because Herc is seen as the godfather of hip-hop, we need to check out the material conditions of his homeland, which is Jamaica, Jamaica. Now, hip-hop is a child of neocolonialism. Now, Herc came of age in the 60s, which was a pretty rough decade for Jamaica. It became independent in 1962, finally free from British colonial rule, and Herc was about 7 years old at the time. So what's the difference between colonialism and neocolonialism? Now, in the case of colonialism, Britain ruled Jamaica directly. One policy that Great Britain implemented, which was common for Western powers to do in colonialized countries, was that it forced it to only grow one crop. In the case of Jamaica, sugar. They weren't allowed to produce anything else. Now, because of this, Jamaica's economy couldn't develop, and sugarcane also fucked up its soil, which made it really hard to grow food after it became independent. It also made it super dependent on other countries for things like, I don't know, fucking food. Aside from that, Western powers could fuck with sugar prices at their own whims. And that was the fucked up situation the country was left in when it became independent in '62. Now, neocolonialism is the situation that comes after that mess. 1 in 3 people being unemployed, the country's economy left in shambles. But of course, people in Jamaica didn't just sit around and accept their fate. When the Democratic Socialist Party, called the PNP, came to power in 1972, they established things like free education, universal healthcare, and all that good stuff. They wanted to build up their economy, but they had to get the capital from somewhere. But after the Jamaican government tried to tie themselves to socialist leaders like Fidel Castro, the CIA was like, we gotta put a stop to this shit. And they made sure that Jamaica couldn't borrow money from American banks, no more. And that's when Jamaica was forced to borrow money from the IMF. Dum dum dum. Now the IMF's like, alright, cool, we'll lend you out some money, but we're pretty much gonna take over your economy, your factories, and implement really harsh austerity measures that's gonna make it impossible for your economy to grow. And Jamaica had to pay crazy interest on these loans as well. This resulted in unemployment, a shortage of goods, and just overall poverty. Sankara, I know you tried to stop them in your country. Socialism works on paper until the CIA comes and fucks up your shit. And this is a cycle that a lot of countries went through. Their economy gets fucked up because of colonization. Then after independence, they're forced to borrow money to build up their economy, which they have to pay crazy interest rates over, leaving them dependent on Western powers again. And after that, foreign businesses invade the fucking country, and that's why every country in the world has Burger King. Now that we're familiar with the material situation in Jamaica, its economic base, we can take a look at how that influenced the ideas of Jamaica, which is also called its superstructure, and especially music. Now, the way music and shows were popping worldwide in those days was through bands actually playing live music. But with the economy all shades of fucked up in Jamaica, live musicians just fled. They went to spots where there was actually money to fucking pay them. But people still had to shake their asses to something. So enter sound system culture. And honestly, no sound system culture, no house parties later in New York. And I'm talking about motherfuckers making their own damn speakers and then amplifying them. Exactly what Herc did for his own house party in 1973. The holy year. And that's probably one of Jamaica's great gifts to hip hop. And having no live musicians caused people to think extremely different about how to make music in the first place as well. This is a perfect example of how the economic base changes ideas in society. People were experimenting with old equipments and fucking around with sounds and crazy echoes. Engineers were recording the live bands that were still there in dub plates. But one night, an engineer forgot to add the vocals to a dub plate. All that was left was the instrumentation. But DJ Redwood didn't give a fuck, and he still played that shit, and the crowd went wild. And this formed the blueprint for MCs to spit over during parties. Now when it comes to rap, there's a lot of proto-rap that came before it, from riots in Afrika, toasting in Harlem, a lot of different shit, as well as this type of MCing in Jamaica. Now it's hard to say what exactly influenced MCs, but I can't imagine this not having influenced young Kool Herc. Like a lot of innovations within hip-hop, it might have been sparked by accidents, but the material conditions were right for them to happen. Instrumental dubs allowed engineers to fuck around with sounds, the same way beatmakers would manipulate bricks much later. And hip-hop could not have existed without a firm sound system, which was prevalent in Jamaica. So alright, you see a link between economic development and how hip-hop evolved, but what the fuck does capitalism's contradictions have to do with that? Let me tell you. Now when we say capitalism, we talk about an economic system and an ideology. The economic system is that of employer and employee. Now the employee does all the labor, while the employer appropriates the value of that, leaving him not to do work, but make all that guap. It's also an ideology that says that a difference in wealth is natural, individuality is good, and most importantly, that property is more important than human life. Contradictions, on the other hand, means movement and opposites. This means that within the economic system of capitalism and its ideology, you have opposite tendencies moving. Sounds complicated, but let me explain. The Jamaican government wants to move towards socialism. The CIA wants it to move to capitalism. This contradiction is solved by the CIA cutting off bank loans, which results in unemployment. This in turn results in live musicians fleeing and sound systems becoming more important. Unemployment itself is a contradiction in capitalism, because an employer wants to pay as little as possible to its employees. But if a CEO making $250,000 would invest like $200,000 of that into hiring new people, no unemployment. Neocolonialism is another one of capitalism's contradictions. Western countries want to appropriate Jamaica's resources while it wants to keep it for itself. This contradiction is resolved by Western countries appropriating Jamaica's money in forms of high interest and taking over businesses. Capitalism's contradictions created a unique set of conditions in Jamaica in the 60s and 70s. This made space for musical styles like ska, dub, and reggae to appear. This was Jamaica's gift to the world, but what some kids in the South Bronx would do with that is a whole nother story. Now next week we're going to be talking about how hip-hop started in the South Bronx and what the material conditions were there to create it. Now, Marx on the Mic is a Space Babies project, so please subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll find the subscribe button somewhere. I always see YouTubers do this. I have no idea where the fuck it is, but please comment on this video, like it, share it with your family, friends, loved ones, whatever. Show your support in whatever way you can. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to be releasing a video every week, so I'll see you next week, Thursday. Peace. Space Baby out.